Andrea is a loyal friend of ACAP, and for years and years, our members are not only but professionals in the area of accounting and auditing benefited thanks to Andrea and openness of her colleagues at ACCA, benefited with a number of professional festive events. I know Andrea as a person who is very passionate about education. Well, first of all, as an accountant and passionate about education, a person that believes that we needed to slightly change the way accounting is studied. So it should be about lifelong education. I think we will take over this idea together with our colleagues from our association, and not only. So thank you very much, Andrea, for accepting to be together with us, and I would like to give you the floor. Thank you very much, Natalia. And Georgetta, it's an honor, it's a pleasure to be here. Once more, I would like to congratulate ACAP and AmCham for organizing this event. I've seen there are hundreds of people who are watching us. It's extraordinary, and I have always been glad to have met you by means of this partnership between ACAP and the ACCA, and that we were able to build wonderful partnerships which bring benefits to professionals in accountancy and auditing. This is an opening panel on a very interesting topic, and it brings an important topic about the profession. We're talking about trends in accounting and auditing. We could talk for hours about that, but we decided just to give an outlook internationally and then to look at it at national level and to speak about trends in the accounting and audit, and then somewhere in the middle, let's say the bridge between these two horizons is the ethics. And even though the panel is called Latest Trends in Accounting and Auditing, ethics was, is, and will be what defines mainly the occupation of an accountant. And now I would like to introduce the panelists. And we have only ladies in this panel. And when I ask them to introduce, I will ask them to introduce themselves, but before we start the panel discussion, I am very glad to ask Mr. Juan Grigorio, Deputy Chairperson of the Chamber of Financial Auditors in Romania, to come with a welcome message to the participants. So, Mr. Grigoriu, the floor is yours. Unfortunately, Mr. Grigoriu did not manage to connect yet. He will connect later. So let's move on with the other panel participants, and then we'll come back to him. Great, thank you. So in this panel, the observer, a special participant, is also Mr. Rotaro, member of the Court of Accounts. And if you have questions or interventions, you are very welcome. So now it is my pleasure to start a panel discussion with our first speaker. And I will switch to English, and that is the language that the presentation will be made.
To English now to introduce our first speaker, Mrs. Elena Misita, who is chair of the IFAC Professional Accountancy Organizations Development and Advisory Group, having been a member since January 2018, and she was nominated by the Union of Accountants, Auditors and Financial Workers of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mrs. Misica is a member of the board of the union and also serves on various professional focused boards and committees. And in March 2020, she became a member of the state-level Accounting and Auditing Commission of Bosnia and Herzegovina that is involved in the regulation of the accountancy profession, including education matters. Mrs. Misica has vast experience in PAO development and strengthening the accountancy profession in jurisdictions that require both strategic and practical assistance in adoption and consistent implementation of high standards of professionalism. And for over 10 years, Mrs. Misica has served as the CEO of Revicon, a company concerned with business consulting, research, and development. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for introducing us in this topic of tendencies in accounting and audit at international level. A pleasure having you here. Thank you very much, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Appreciate a kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this conference. To my colleagues from ICAP, I would like to congratulate on this great anniversary. So I'm touched, honored, and privileged to have the opportunity to be with you today. I hope all you and your families and friends are staying safe and healthy during these challenging times. We are the profession of more than 3 million people, represented by IFAC at the global level as the voice of profession and crucial knowledge convener. Our global connectivity helps us all to cope with the demands of our work. The accountancy profession is in the front line of every organization, every government, and all societies in the fight for the future. Our profession in a rapidly changing world will be determined by what we choose to do, the choices we make, the changes we propose. How we act in this moment will define the future of the profession, and the opportunity for positive change is imminent. Trends in our environment are fundamentally transforming the way we live and work, including the transformation of our perception of the world, how we interact with each other. We know that our profession remains relevant if we identify and then meet many demands on our rapidly evolving world. So, the first question is how to make a profession ready to meet these challenges. Let's start from the first question. We must question actually what that means for how we educate and prepare the professional accountants for the present and very different future. When I said professional accountants, I just would like to highlight it. I mean accountants and auditors. To ensure accountancy education can meet the challenges of competency and skills-based changes, we need to understand where the profession is heading. We are all familiar with accountants doing the same things. What we actually do: gathering, extracting, manipulating data and information, reconciling information across separate systems, and making decisions based on samples or limited information. These skills are normally obtained from classroom-based prescribed learning, a one-size-fits-all approach to learning. COVID accelerated our evolution to accountants doing the same things differently. So in this environment, we have seen increased use of automation, visualization for more powerful insights, and leveraging communication technologies to make a greater impact. All tend to rely on increased self-learning and personal exploration. Accountants doing different things, however, will be defined by actions we take today. The action that Association of Professional Accountants and Auditors of the Republic of Moldova, with all other relevant stakeholders, take today. A competency in the future will be the ability to see and anticipate trends on horizon and advise clients on the implication of those trends. We need to understand this new world like we understand accounting. A McKinsey Global Survey finds that 9 in 10 business managers said skill gaps exist in their organization or soon would. Accountancy is not the profession operating in a static world, and the skills learned have to reflect the equal measure of agility. This is a clear need for well-rounded skill set that combine technical skills and professional skills that are rooted in relationship building and communication. As one CFO said, we need accountants and auditors who can work as collaborators and partners with executive teams who can leverage technology and data and identify risks, and who can effectively communicate the risk within the greater business function. So, what we can do? I'm advising you to implementing the new international educational standards. International education standards is the global benchmark for sound accounting educational programs. One of the key decisions relevant to the development of the profession in my region was adoption and implementation of those standards. We have adopted and started applying ISs since 2006. Developing internationally compatible accounting education at both the university and professional development level is underlying requirement for building the necessary capacity to support better quality corporate financial information. The accountancy profession's ability to satisfy users' information needs contribute to the effective economy that creates value to society. This crisis cast a spotlight on anticipation and agility, make it clear that our profession must take the opportunity now to rethink our curriculums. I'm suggesting you to mobilize all relevant stakeholders and experts. Professionals accountants in an organization can facilitate dialogue amongst all stakeholders and experts. Let them help you to design your vision for future learning and development. Learning from other POs as well, and IFAC can help you. In addition to the current disruption from the pandemic-induced lockdowns and economic contraction, technological adoption by many companies will transform tasks, jobs, and skills. So what we can do? We can facilitate reskilling and upskilling. And we focus on the relevant competencies, what our profession need to learn, and how we need to learn, both changing. We need to prepare ourselves to sustain in the new normal, whatever that means. So, I'm suggesting challenge yourself on the time to the market for changes to your curricula and assess innovations. Meet personalized needs of professional accountants based on competencies, not roles. Provide assistance to all stakeholders responsible for providing accountants. What IFAC is doing, because needs are changing. So IFAC has built a new free interactive tool, the Accountancy Education e-tool. The new e-tool, which is grounded in international educational standards, is more than electronic handbook or electronic version of the standards. It's a comprehensive tool providing clear linkages between the standards and the practical implementation support. I would like to recap the main points. We need to invest in education now, and we are going to come out of this with a competitive advantage. We have to show aspiring accountants that those who might be upskilling during their career, that the profession is anticipating, adapting with agility, and remaining a step ahead. To remain relevant, accountants cannot just produce the number. They are being called to tell the larger story behind the numbers and help solve society needs in the process. Thank you very much. And Andrea, I'm heading back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Misica. I think these are the relevant questions we should be asking ourselves now in order to make sure that we are not only ready, but also creating the future. And now, with apologies to our next speaker, who is also a colleague in ACCA. So please understand, we have Mr. Grigoriu on the call who just joined. So I will give him the word for a short, brief salute to the conference, and then we will come back to your presentation. Voi reveni la limba română.
And now I will switch back to Romanian because it is our pleasure to have together with us Mr. Juan Grigorio, Deputy Chairperson of the Chamber of Financial Auditors in Romania, who has connected to our event and would like to tell you a couple of things. Mr. Grigorio, the floor is yours, and thank you. But you are muted. Please turn on your microphone.
E perfect, vă auzim.
Eu am avut unele probleme.
I had some issues. I was listening from the very beginning, but I was somewhere in another version. Good afternoon, and let's say it's good to see you again, because I have taken part in this event for some years now. It is my pleasure to express to all professionals in the Republic of Moldova the greetings of our management, also the message from the leadership of the Chamber of Financial Auditors in Romania. And as I said before, it is my pleasure, and it's my honor to have this occasion to congratulate you on going on despite all the obstacles to organize such valuable events for our occupation and for the economy overall. Year 2020 was a year of adaptation and changes for our profession. It was a year where auditors had to rethink their strategy and adapt their program and way of working in order to streamline their activity and align to the new social and economic context. COVID-19 pandemic affected heavily, and it still affects the world economy. Its consequences are complex, and they bring up challenges for the humanity, and that also, of course, includes challenges for financial auditors. Some activities have been suspended. We had to adapt on the go to some activities or communication with our clients, and we reduced significantly our physical and interpersonal activity. We had additional expenditures related to reorganizing our activity in terms of digitalizing, and that meant time and effort that was necessary to implement all of this. And despite all these problems caused by the COVID crisis, which push down all the companies, it is important that we are responsive to the market needs and changes in the legislation. Our concern during this time was to convince our clients that we will provide them high quality services, transparent and timely services. Moreover, we tried to adapt our services depending on the needs on the market, especially needs of the small companies that are in difficulty now. Restrictions imposed because of the pandemic influenced significantly the communication between auditors and clients. Of course, all these restrictions overlap with legal amendments that were enforced, to which we have to align. A financial auditor, similarly to other sectors of a society, needs a certain period to be able to adapt and then move back to the situation that was before the pandemic. I'm confident that the life after the pandemic will be different from the life before the crisis. Year 2020 will stay in our history as a delimiting line in the style of doing business. Given the dynamics of change that our occupation is going through, I'd like to encourage you to carry out your work professionally, make effort in order to implement this digital transition and have a sustainable management. I would like to conclude my message expressing hope that we will be able to overcome all of these difficulties. We will overcome the social medical crisis that we are going through, and that in the not so distant future, we will be able to meet face to face and discuss about challenges that our occupation faces. So once more, thank you for giving me the opportunity to take part in this event, and I wish you a lot of success in the conference works and in your general work that you do to support our profession. Thank you very much, and as I said before, I wish you success and good health. Thank you very much, Mr. Grigorio, and I am sure that ACAP as well as ACCA appreciate the partnership with the Chamber of Financial Auditors, and we really appreciate your optimistic message, but also realist message and this partnership messages that you shared. Thank you very much. And I hope that you can stay with us for the entire panel discussion or entire conference. Thank you. And now, please mute your microphone. Great. And now I will switch to English again in order to introduce the next speaker in our panel, who will talk about the future of the accountancy profession.
As I was saying, although the title of the panel is latest trends in accounting and audit and talking about the future, as I was saying, ethics was, is, and will be definitely a part of the fiber of what a professional accountant is. Our next speaker, Miss Alison Hennell, is a chartered accountant herself, currently working at ACCA in the qualifications department. She achieved membership of a professional accounting organization in 1991, and she worked for PwC in London and Sydney in audit, corporate finance, and management consultancy. She then joined the University of Reading, where she was an associate professor in accounting and head of teaching and learning at Henley Business School. And part of her remit was to ensure that professional ethics were firmly embedded across all undergraduate and postgraduate programs. And in her current role with ACCA, she has responsibility for the ACCA qualification, which is our main offering, our main qualification, including the ACCA exams, ethics, and professional skills and practical work experience. Thank you very much for being here with us today to talk about this important subject in which obviously you have so much experience. Thank you for accepting the invitation, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Good afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and have the opportunity to share some thoughts on the subject of ethics and integrity. Ethics is a topic which is at the very heart of being a professional accountant. And I'd like to start by thinking about the question, what do we mean by ethics? And I think, looking at the first slide, ethics can be summed up in 4 words. doing the right thing, which can actually be expanded to doing the right thing even when no one is looking. Now, this is a mantra that my brother used to apply when he was the chief exec of Walmart International and was aiming to instill an ethical culture across the organization. But what is the right thing? Well, it can mean different things to different people. Some people think ethics is about treating others the way we would expect to be treated ourselves. So being honest, truthful, fair, and consistent. Some people consider ethics from the perspective of what the world would look like if everyone was unethical. For example, how could financing decisions be made if all companies lied about their profit or asset base to secure a loan? This can then help define what ethical behavior would entail. Other people are guided by the wider consequences of ethical or even unethical behavior. For example, an ethical issue I experienced relating to the suppression of fraudulent activity in university exam assessment impacted not only the students, but also members of staff, the integrity of the assessment process, and the reputation of both the business school and the wider university. Ethics can be linked to virtues, but this can become inconsistent as different cultures and environments can deem different behaviours to be virtuous. Some would liken ethics to morals, which implies that they are maybe religious or faith-based. Again, there may be some inconsistencies globally, but the overall principle achieved should equate to fairness, which is an important ethical consideration. So what about integrity? Integrity is being honest and truthful, being fair, complying with laws, being open and adaptable, showing consistency, and perhaps most important, taking corrective action. I would see integrity as a key pillar of ethics. So in summary, ethics can be thought of as values and principles that are acceptable to society, that are concerned with human character and behaviour, and that go way beyond obeying laws, rules, and regulations. As accountants, we have a code of ethics that guides us and tries to ensure that we do the right thing. The challenge comes with consistently applying these principles, particularly when issues such as self-interest, human nature, intimidation, personal opinions and emotions can come into play. It can be hard to speak out when something is wrong, especially if we may be personally damaged by doing so. So moving on to the next slide, I'd like to consider why ethics is relevant. Well, fundamentally, ethics are relevant because accountants have a binding professional obligation to act always in the public interest. And if we are to be effectively acting in the public interest, ethics have to be at the heart of what we do as accountants. From the moment someone engages with the profession, whether this is at school, university, or in employment, it is essential that they continually learn about ethics and how this is central to all that they do as an accountant. The key thing is that we all know how to resolve ethical issues in a way that upholds our profession and the trust that the public place in us. In addition to assuring public trust, ethics are also important to enable markets to operate effectively and to provide information that is reliable. Ethics is not a static discipline. It's continually evolving, particularly in the modern digital age. Ethics must not become an afterthought in the race for technological advancement. So let's consider, for example, artificial intelligence and machine learning. The analysis of unstructured live data over time will eventually lead to machines formatting decision rules and being able to make decision outcomes without the involvement of humans. This brings with it several ethical considerations. For example, under the principle of professional competence and due care, accountants will be required to have a really good understanding of AI systems and the controls that need to be put in place. The fact that professional accountants will increasingly be working with the outputs of automated process will mean that professional skepticism will be fundamental to identify any unintended bias built into automated processes. Environmental, sustainable and governance, or ESG as we commonly refer to it, is another emerging area where there will need to be far greater integrity-led decision-making in which ethics has an important role to play. We see examples of businesses being called on to make decisions between financial profit and long-term sustainability. And there is wider stakeholder interest in businesses due to the impact that it has on the use of capital and resources. The news yesterday around Deliveroo's IPO was a really interesting illustration of the growing power of ESG. Deliveroo's share price dropped by more than a quarter on its first day of trading due to concerns in the market over its treatment of employees and its governance structure. Moving on to the next slide, I'd like to talk about the requirements for professional accountants. For all accountants, the source of ethical principles is the International Code of Ethics for Professional Standards, published by the International Ethics Standard Board for Accountants, known as the EASBA. Individual accounting organisations use this international code as the basis for their own detailed ethical codes. At ACCA, for example, we have the ACCA Code of Ethics and Conduct, which is binding not only on ACCA members, but also on ACCA students and affiliates. The Code of Ethics and Conduct sets out a framework of fundamental principles of ethics and is based on the 5 principles listed on the slide. It also provides guidance on how we can safeguard ourselves against ethical breaches. As part of their continuing professional development, or CPD, ACCA members are required to declare on an annual basis that they have maintained and, where appropriate, developed their competence in relation to professional ethics. When people engage the services of an accountant, they do not and should not have to make their own assessment of ethics of members of that body. Instead, whether consciously or unconsciously, they rely on the professional bodies, such as ACCA, to make appropriate checks and ensure compliance and adherence to the code. Membership of professional bodies, such as ACCA, implies a high level of ethics and professionalism, and the public must be able to put its trust in the profession by relying on this. Moving on to the next slide, I'd like to talk specifically about the rule of PAOs. So, for a number of years now, there have been regular news reports about corporate failures, and this is only likely to be exacerbated by events such as the COVID-19 pandemic. When a company fails, particularly if it is a large public interest entity, it is only appropriate that the reasons for this failure are questioned and investigated. Inevitably, this impacts on public trust in accountants and auditors. If the public are to fully trust the profession, then they must also trust that there is appropriate oversight by the professional accounting organisation, such as ACCA. All PAOs have an infrastructure for ethics, which includes education, monitoring, discipline, technical advice and support. Where a PAO acts as a statutory regulator, it must conduct activities such as checking that members are qualified and eligible to undertake regulated work before issuing them with any licenses required to do so. The conduct and the standard of the regulated work performed by these members must also then be monitored with appropriate action taken where this is not satisfactory. There is naturally more regulation required for auditors and a greater level of scrutiny than there might be over members working in non-audit roles. These additional obligations typically include requirements for additional qualifications and experience, as well as the need to hold specific licenses and certificates. PAOs also have an obligation to report to superior regulators and to demonstrate that regulation is effective. Of course, despite the high ethical standards and values which PEAOs such as ACCA promote, these can and will be breached by certain individuals. Criminal activity and breaches of the ethical code by accountants brings disrepute to the profession. There are clear regulations around disciplinary action that might be undertaken by professional bodies and the sanctions which might be employed in such an event. For example, it is possible for students, affiliates and members to be struck off the ACCA register for non-compliance with ethical rules and regulations. In fact, to maintain credibility and trust, it is vital that such a sanction is employed for serious non-compliance. Of course, such disciplinary action is inevitably reactive. To enhance trust and develop an ethical ethos in the profession as a whole, it is also essential that we undertake a proactive approach to ethics by fostering an environment which encourages members to act ethically and to provide them with the appropriate tools to make ethical decisions. We also need accounting education that promotes ethics at every stage of learning. I'd now like briefly to take a look at the wider regulatory environment. And I think it's important to consider the impact of ethics on the wider regulatory landscape. So moving on to the next slide. Over recent years, there have been several very high-profile accounting scandals, which have damaged the reputation of the accounting profession. Without exception, these arose as a result of the lack of ethics amongst individuals running the companies. In Europe, the Wirecard scandal, which involved the inflation of profits via forged and backdated contracts, and also putting money belonging to third parties onto the balance sheet incorrectly, resulted in the insolvency in 2022 of Wirecard, a DAX-listed fintech company. With revelations of a 1.9 billion euro black hole, the CEO, Markus Brunn, was arrested, and questions were raised regarding the regulatory failure of Germany's top financial watchdog, and also the possible malpractice of the long-term auditors. The aftermath of the collapse of Wirecard included strengthening of regulations on accounting, severing ties with the Financial Reporting Enforcement Panel, and raising the need for a single common European market rules, and the restructuring of the European Securities and Markets Authority, empowered by a legal basis. Closer at home in the UK, we had the collapse of Carillion, a listed service company, in 2019, and an accounting black hole at one of our key retailers, Tesco. These corporate failures have contributed to several reviews of the accounting profession, and particularly auditing. Sir John Kingman conducted a review of the main accounting regulatory body, the Financial Reporting Council, which has led to the FRC being abolished and replaced by the new Auditing, Reporting, Governance Authority, ARGA, which has both statutory recognition and funding, an expanded role to include audit quality. The recent Bryden report looked into the auditing profession, and the CMA reported on competition in the audit sector. These have all led to the Department of Business, Energy and Strategy launching its own review of the nature of audit and the issue of audit quality. These reviews and the associated recommendations have had major ramifications across the accounting profession. I'd like to finish just with a call for action. So, final slide. The key points I'd like to leave you with are the fact that ethics goes beyond obeying laws, rules and regulations. Ethics really is about who you are, and it's about what as accountants we do. It's about always doing the right thing, even if there are personal consequences. We all have a responsibility, not only for our own personal ethical standards, but for ensuring that ethics are instilled into future generations of accountants. Within the organisation where we work, whether it's a company or a not-for-profit entity, we all need to play a part in leading or contributing to a strong culture of compliance which upholds ethical standards. Thank you very much for your attention, And I'll now hand back to Andrea.
Thank you very much for this inspirational, also practical, personal, but at the same time very wide perspective on ethics. I really found it very interesting, and I'm sure also for the professional associations who are represented here, because you also mentioned about our obligations as accountancy organizations. But also for the attendance, as I think, as you rightly concluded, ethics is a personal choice. It's about who we are, and it's the daily decisions that are driving our ethical compass. So thank you very much for this presentation. I will switch back to Romanian to introduce our next speaker. So we have Mrs. Tonu, and I will continue in Romanian. Doamna Natalia Tonu activează.
Mrs. Natalia Tonu is from the Department of Regulating, Accounting and Audit for 25 years. She's the Deputy Director of the Financial Policies Division and Head of Accounting and Audit Policy Section, and Chair of the Audit Supervision Committee of the Council for Public Surveillance of Audit. She will speak about the reform of audit and accounting from the perspective of the regulator. The association agreement with the European Union, the obligation to transpose the European Union directives, the developed regulatory documents, and expectations from the reforms. So I am sure that her presentation about the future trends, very practical future trends, will be of interest for you. Thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours. Andrea, thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate the auditors for joining the accountants on the occasion of our professional day that we celebrate every year on April the 4th. And I would like to wish lots of success both to accountants and auditors. I hope that your professional efforts are appreciated and the significance of this profession is recognized. I would like also to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this event, which is a very good opportunity for us to feel the pulse of the profession, because at such events we discuss many situations of interest for us, and we, representatives of regulatory authorities, supervisory authorities, professional organizations of auditors and accountants, all of us are active stakeholders of this area. And if we are to speak about trends in accounting and auditing at the national level, we have to take into account that the system of accounting and auditing, like any other system, is a living process, a continuously developing process. That is why it has a past, a present, and a future. And for us to understand where we are going to, we have to understand where we are coming from. And let's remind what were the events that impacted the reforms in accounting and auditing. So here we have to mention the association agreement signed between the Republic of Moldova and the European Union. By this agreement, our country assumed the obligation to transpose into the national legislation two directives, one in accounting and the second one in auditing area. So it is about the directive on annual financial statements, consolidated statements, and the related reports of certain enterprises, and the directive on the annual funds and consolidated funds. The transposition of directives had the goal to improve the accounting system and auditing system, including by establishing a reporting system, a financial reporting system comparable to the one used in EU countries, and in establishing an auditing and a supervision system based on the best practices and EU regulations. As a result, now in accounting and financial reporting area, we have the following regulatory documents related to the fact that our country has assumed the commitment to transpose the accounting directive. So first we speak about the loan accounting and financial reporting in force since January 1st, 2019. National accounting standards, the amended one in force since January 1st, 2020, the general accounting charter of the same date, and two other important standards, submission of financial statements, both individual and consolidated ones, which for the first time will be applied by entities when preparing the financial statements for 2020. Also, two methodological guidelines were developed and approved, and they are used by entities in order to prepare the financial statements, both individual and consolidated, for 2020. The Ministry of Finance has also developed methodological recommendations on the implementation of amendments to the national standards, and we also have a draft regulatory document. The amendments developed by the Ministry of Finance to the Contravention Code, Article 295, which regulates the violations and sanctions in accounting and financial reporting area. In late 2019, the Ministry of Finance developed this draft. It sent it to the Ministry of Justice for promotion, and we are waiting for this regulation to be approved, which will complete this whole process of approving the necessary regulations in this area. Regarding auditing, we have the law on the audit of financial statements in force since 2019, and it includes a number of important provisions from the EU directive. This law clearly differentiates the functions and duties, the regulatory ones from the supervision ones, between the Ministry of Finance and the Council for Public Surveillance of Audit. So currently the Ministry of Finance has the function of regulating the regulatory framework, and the Council is the supervisory body from the registry of the audit, registration of audit, certification of auditors, and ending with ensuring the quality of audits by performing an external quality control at the auditing entities. These functions used to be performed previously by the Ministry of Finance. Regarding our expectation as a regulatory authority in this area, I would like to mention the following. First, we would like to have a stable regulatory framework, which is at the same time open to quality changes. We know that accountants are quite reluctant to any legal amendments, and for them to have stability in terms of methods, it's very important for them. But the developments result in new economic transactions, and as a result, the regulatory documents need to be amended in order to reflect how to account for these novelties, these new types of economic transactions. We also focused on the preparation and submission of quality financial statements by entities and the satisfaction of the informational needs of users of financial situations. We have done this by increasing the level of clarity and comparability of financial statements. And here we speak about the format of financial statements for creditors, founders, investors, business partners, both from the country and from abroad. Also, we focused on simplifying the reporting conditions for some types of entities. Here we speak about the small and micro entities in order to decrease the administrative pressure on them while preparing the financial statements. And the requests to financial reporting are increasing proportionally depending on the category of the entity. So the smaller the entity, the lower the requirements. The bigger the entity, the higher the requirements in terms of financial reporting. One of the goals was to conduct a compulsory audit at large and public interest entities, entities that have a major impact on the national economy. These are the biggest entity in the Republic of Moldova, about 700 or 800 entities. So they account for about 1.5% of all the entities that are reporting, according to the data that we have received from the National Bureau of Statistics for 2019. So if we are speaking about compulsory audit, we understand that the number of entities is not that large that fall under this requirement. So it is about 1.5% of all entities. Another goal of regulators was to establish a public a system of public supervision of auditors. So for that, the National Council for Public Supervision of Auditors was established, and now it has all the necessary powers to be able to perform efficiently this function. Establishment of a system of public supervision of audit, implementation of a system to ensure quality, especially by external quality control. So this is a function of the Council of Public Supervision of Auditing. We also focused on the establishment of an efficient system of investigations and sanctions in order to be able to perform a quality audit of financial situations. And here I would like to draw your attention to the fact that these sanctions were established not in order to punish for violations, but mainly in order to prevent violations of the law. In order to get the best results as a result of the reform in the accounting and auditing area, the Ministry of Finance will continue communicating closely with practitioners via professional associations, business associations, from which we receive quite often recommendations and suggestions. And of course, we will maintain the direct communication, a communication that we try to harness on our platform of transparency in the decision making. So this is the platform that we, the Ministry of Finance, have set up in order to communicate on draft regulations or draft rules, and each accountant has the possibility to get involved and express their opinion on draft regulations and laws. We also have an interesting platform for practitioners. It is the Council for Accounting and Financial Reporting under the Ministry of Finance. The members of this council are practitioners, representatives of business environment, academia, and state authorities. This council reviews all draft regulations and laws in accounting and financial reporting area, as well as the problematic issues related to accounting and financial reporting. The Ministry of Finance will also provide the necessary methodological support to accountants and auditors in implementing the specialized law on accounting and financial reporting, also in the implementation of national and international standards of accounting, financial reporting, auditing, as well as others. The Ministry of Finance will continue to provide the necessary support to the Council for Public Supervision of Audit in order to strengthen the capacities of this institution, for this institution to be able to develop a quality insurance system based on the best practices. I would like to say that recently a lot of progresses were made in reforming accounting and auditing, but setting up the legal framework is the first step only. So what we have to do next is to ensure its efficient implementation by cooperating with the professionals. So we rely a lot on your support. Andrea, that's all I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for this comprehensive presentation of your work. I am sure that this whole workload keeps you very busy, and for sure this is for the benefit of the profession, and I am really glad to hear about the cooperation and dialogue, and the fact that you are here with us is a clear proof of the existing dialogue. So thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for honoring us with your presence. And now I have some questions that I would like to ask to panel speakers. We have about 10-15 minutes from this first panel session, and I will ask in the order of their presentations. So several key issues, in my opinion, of key importance for the value of the profession, for our future. And now I will switch to English in order to ask the question to Elena Misita and to Alison.
We know that financial reporting, the story that that numbers say has always been really important. But my question to you is, why do you think that now, more than ever, is high quality financial reporting needed and important?
Thank you very much, Andrea, for your question. I will make it very, very short, having in mind that we have just a couple of minutes more. We are talking from right now, I will just say very shortly, the government all over the world facing with the tough choices. And they will not be able to do everything without help of the profession. So the governments need the good quality information to take a better decision that helps economic stability and also helps to increase trust and stability of society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this really gives the very, very large overview of how our reporting and how the numbers we generate are so important for the wider economies and the wider decisions that that our governments are taking to drive our well-being forward. So thank you very much, Jelena. I will move now to our second panelist, Mrs. Alison Hennell. I, for one, really appreciated the presentation on ethics and how it approached ethics from so many points of view. But I would just like to put ethics in the current context in which, unfortunately, we all are, and ask if any impact was felt from the current crisis of COVID-19 on professional ethics. And you have to unmute. Yes.
Very, very, very interesting question, Andrea. I'm glad you asked it. If you look at what's happened in the last year, you know, the impact of the pandemic globally has been huge. And although some businesses have thrived in the pandemic, many businesses have had some very, very significant challenges. And I think, to me, perhaps one of the most common and challenging ethical issues going forward is that accountants, like ourselves, will be put under pressure by others, often more senior to ourselves, to actually do something that we know is not right. You know, whether it's, you know, interpreting IFRS in a questionable way to boost profits, whether it's omitting disclosure of information that maybe has a potentially adverse impact. And I think, you know, the message I'd give is that even though it can be really hard, we know when something is not right and we have to speak up about it. I think the other thing I just want to highlight, which, you know, again, you can relate it back to the pandemic. The pandemic has accelerated digital. There's no doubt about that. You know, we've moved at ACCA more rapidly in the last 12 months than we have in the last 5 years. And, you know, the speed of evolution and the digital transformation that we're undergoing is so significant. And I think when we relate that to ethics and accountant, what is going to become really critical is professional skepticism. And the reason I say that is that fundamentally accountants are moving from historically being processors of transaction to actually being data interpreters. So looking at the output from often, you know, machine-driven data. So I think it's going to be hugely important that we apply professional skepticism to all data and all information that is within our remit. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. And I also really like that you have also brought in not only the crisis of the pandemic, but also, you know, looking forward how much digital is going to influence how professionals work. So thank you very much. I know Mr. Rotaru, who is a member of the Court of Accounts, wanted to say a couple of words. So I will switch to Romanian. Domnul Rotaru, am înțeles că...
Mr. Rotaru, as I understood, you wanted to say something. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I liked the presentations very much and the approach of the speakers. And the ethical aspect is a very important one, a definitive one in accounting and in auditing. But I have a question to Mrs. Tonu, to Natalia. I liked her presentation about the development of the accountant profession and changes in reporting, but also in the profession of an auditor. But at some point, you were speaking about the permanence and rigidity of an accountant profession in relation to changes made in the reporting framework. And I would like to highlight some things here. On one hand, the accountant has financial reporting and fiscal reporting, and every reporting that they do takes additional effort and an additional level of stress to adjust the internal reporting of every institution, of every entity, and reporting towards public institutions. I would like you to understand that not necessarily accountants are rigid, but the changes often create some disturbance in the activity. And I would like to welcome the fact that the Ministry of Finance recently made changes for the reform, but it did not disturb our work. And I wanted to ask, what about 2021 for the accountant professions, for the financial reporting framework? Will we see any radical changes? Are there or some technical changes that you intend to do so? We want to know what to expect in 2021. For the area of accounting and financial reporting, we have an entire legal framework in force for bookkeeping and financial reporting. All regulatory acts that were developed and approved are functional, are applicable, and the Ministry of Finance, by means of providing methodological support, is monitoring potential misunderstandings or some discrepancies found by auditors or accountants when they apply these provisions. And since the first financial statements that will be drafted according to the amended national accounting standards will be drafted for the year 2020, and the deadline for submitting financial statements is end of May 2021, it might happen that during this period, some accountants or auditors might have questions or some unclarity, or they might face some barriers in applying these legal acts. And obviously, the Ministry of Finance will accept the questions from entities, from accountants. We will look into them, we will systematize them. And if we find questions that need to be solved by amending the legal framework, we will do that. But we will try not to make changes just one extra time, or not to stress the accountants again. I mean, we don't have any fundamental or essential reforms planned in the area of accounting for the nearest future, except if that is necessary as a result of a reporting period in line with the amended legislation. I hope that gives an answer to your question. Actually, that is a very positive message for this sector. I think that you have such an approach, and I wish you success. Thank you. Well, this is not to encourage accountants not to ask questions to the Ministry of Finance or not to talk to us when they see some discrepancy or unclarity. We are always available to the professional accountants and auditors to provide any explanation necessary. Thank you very much, Mrs. Tono. That's an extraordinary message coming to the professionals from the ministry. Of course, we all desire dialogue. And as long as we are here, I think there is a question from the public, from Ms. Latina, who is going to ask her question on behalf of a professional from the public. That is true, Andrea. But before I ask the question, and I would also like to thank all the wonderful ladies for their excellent presentations and interesting topics that were addressed. And all of that will add value to the work of accountants and auditors from our country. And as we are connected to various networks, and that's where our participants can take part in our conference, we pick the questions that we receive there. So it's not surprising that we have another express question from Mrs. Tono, but it is somehow connected to what Mr. Otaro asked before. And the question is the following. From the perspective of a regulator, what is your opinion about the completeness of the legal and regulatory acts in the area of accounting? Do they need amendment, or do they need time to be checked? Maybe can you highlight once more what can accountants expect in the upcoming period? Speaking of accountants, I think I already answered this question when Mr. Brotaro asked it before. There will be no essential amendments. If you're asking about auditing, because I hope auditors have similar questions too, because they're also a little bit accountants, and I can answer from a perspective of auditing. In the area of auditing, we don't plan any major changes because the law is new. There are no issues or barriers in implementing the law and the international auditing standards or secondary legislation related to the law on audit of financial statements. When it comes to surveillance, our surveillance Committee for Public Surveillance Audit for 2019-2020 developed the entire set of regulatory acts that allows this institution to carry out its surveillance function. All regulatory acts and procedures were developed, from registering audit certification, charging fees and payments, and until the regulation on external quality control. There are no problems detected so far, and I don't think it will be necessary. At least in the upcoming 2 years, we will not need any changes, any amendments. When it comes to accountants, some clarification is needed, maybe, but I hope I answered. Still, I am optimistic because for us as a regulator, it is an extra task when we need to develop amendments or to develop new regulatory acts. So far, once more, we don't have any major issues that would concern us or would give us complex homework to lead to approving new regulatory acts or amending significantly some existing acts. Thank you very much for the positive answer. This brings our panel to an end. I highly appreciate the time of the speakers, the attention of our viewers and panelists, very topical.
It was lovely having you in this panel.